Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 9th episode of the School of Resistance.
Bonsoir tout le monde et bienvenue à ce 9e épisode de l'École de la Résistance.
I hear the French translation now. I don't know what is happening, but okay. So hello again. Welcome to the 9th episode of the School of Resistance, a live stream format that invites experts around the world to discuss valuable alternatives for the future and to create a blueprint for politics of resistance. The project is a collaboration between Ente Gent, IIPM, Akademie der Künste, and this 9th episode is hosted in collaboration with Schauspielhaus Zurich, GEA Waldviertler, Brot für alle, Lem Africa Bukavu, AfriWatch Lubumbashi, the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights, and Public Eye. Today's episode is called A Global Jurisdiction for a Global Economy. All over the world, multinational companies are violating human rights, disregarding labor rights, relocating people, and destroying habitats without being held accountable. Often, states depend on corporate investments, or a few corrupt politicians earn enough from them to accept the damage to the population. With complicated and dynamic networks of subcontractors and the outsourcing of risky businesses, responsibility becomes diffuse. In addition, sophisticated strategies of tax avoidance and tax havens are used. The results are devastating. The overexploitation of the planet's resources for the production of cheap products is driving the collapse of the global ecosystem. Global economic inequalities fuel social conflicts and force people to flee. Together with the lawyer and vice legal director of the European Center of Constitutional and Human Rights, Miriam Sage-Maas, who is here present with us, and the lawyer and chief investigator of the Como Tribunal, Sylvestre Bisimwa, we will speak about global justice tonight. My name is Eva Maria Berci. I'm a dramaturg, and I've been working for years now with IIPM and Milo Rau. And the School of Resistance is somehow dedicated to the Congolese hearings of the Como Tribunal, a global economic tribunal of the civil society initiated by Milo Rau in 2015. I would like to introduce the two guests of this evening. Sylvestre Bisimwa. He is, as I said, the lawyer and chief investigator of the Como Tribunal. At the beginning of October, so some weeks ago, together with the lawyer and human rights activist Céline Chisena, he traveled to Katanga in the south of DRC, the main mining region of the Congo. And with the Congolese hearings, they are continuing the activities of the Como Tribunal 3 years after the release of Milo Rau's documentary film. They investigate the responsibility of political elites and multinational companies in a series of human rights violations, cases of environmental pollution and corruption. On the 25th of October from 4 to 7, so this coming Sunday, the hearings will be summarized, debated, and the preliminary verdict will be given at Schauspielhaus Zurich. The event can be followed as a live stream on the IIPM Facebook page, and the final session and deliberations of the tribunal will take place afterwards next year in February in Kolwezi, so in the south of DRC. The second guest, Miriam Sage-Maas, will be leading the investigations in Zurich. She coordinates the Business and Human Rights program at ECCHR. She has worked on various cases against corporations, including proceedings against Lidl relating to the exploitation of workers in Bangladesh and Pakistan. and against companies trading in cotton picked by forced child labor in Uzbekistan. I met Miriam for the first time at the Berlin hearings 2015, where she was on stage as an expert. And since then, we were regularly collaborating with ECCHR and in IIPM's projects such as General Assembly and others. Thank you, Miriam, and thank you, Sylvestre, to be here with us. I quickly want to remind you of the possibility for you to engage in the conversation by asking questions. So everybody can just send an email to schoolofresistance@entegent.be or by commenting on the live stream on the Facebook pages of Entegent and IIPM, or on Twitter via the hashtag School of Resistance. So please contribute to the discussion. Before we start the conversation, I would like to show a video. In 2017, shortly before the official premiere of the Como Tribunal, we traveled to Bukavu and Goma in Eastern Congo to show the film to the protagonists of the people affected by the crimes and devastations shown in the film. When we saw the reactions of the public in Congo that you will see in the film, we knew that somehow we had to continue the work of the tribunal, and I think you understand it when you see the video. So please.
La possibilité de poser des questions. Alors on va donner la place au public après pour ajouter, pour clarifier les choses, pour critiquer.
Moi, je n'ai pas été d'accord avec l'appellation tribunal virtuel, parce que je trouve que ce tribunal a été très proche de la réalité.
Je voudrais bien qui se lève, mais comme je suis mignonne.
Quelles sont les initiatives qui sont mises en marche afin de réconforter cette population longtemps meurtrie?
La flamme que Milo vient d'allumer, nous ne devons pas l'éteindre. Les Congolais doivent s'approprier cette flamme et poursuivre.
Ce film est aujourd'hui pour nous un élan pour briser le silence et vouloir les changements. Je demanderai à Isdesbal Biabouzé, qui est le représentant du gouvernement provincial dans cette salle, que nous voulons ces changements-là. Plus jamais des contrats léonais dans le secteur minier. Parce que tout le problème auquel nous faisons face aujourd'hui, selon la réalité vécue dans les films, provient du secteur minier.
Qu'est-ce que vous voulez qu'on fasse? Hatuna kazi Bukavu, hatuna kazi nyingine.
Okuliko omukazi kakula kihaba omulokalite mukungwe wahabire biki bigumire bakashomba omukazi ngaru akagera mama Venancia kumanyira okuweterero abazire nyama.
Est-ce que les droits de la femme ne peuvent plus être respectés tout simplement parce qu'elle est femme dans une communauté où il y a des lois?
Buli ebirwadde siribyoshinde akino akagezere butambi kyogero mirebe kweli kwaba mama nabakwinja bulya yamalangu ligulu lyoshi ebirwadde bona malala bikuru gwere bulya amagumu kagendekera iguru ndera gomango lakini ebirwadde byo binali byagendekera okuba.
Il faut aussi que les leaders accomplissent ces tâches, donnent aussi des réalités sur le terrain pour que ces films soient accomplis. Aussi, il faut que l'État congolais accepte de faire des élections indépendantes et transparentes. Ça, c'est ma préoccupation pour que la population retrouve la paix.
Le plus grand problème de ce pays, comme on le dit, le poisson commence par courir par la tête. On ne va pas demander à vous de changer, non. C'est nous qui devons changer.
Ilipitikana wakati uko president wa Assemblée nationale. Ulifanya nini kwa kuevite hii yote isifanyike kwa wakati yako?
Wakati yenyewe mnaangalia hii filmu, bale batu wenye baliwao, batu wenye biko bananyanganyiwa, bananyanyasiwa, hii filmu balifanya mbele ya viongozi. Nikusema abakubateta, balikuwa banabambilia mabaya yenye balifanya kwa kujiheshimu. Mimi naita manque d'honneur. Si bakongomani tunakosa culture ya honneur.
Ça m'a révolté de voir ce film, et à la fin quand on dit qu'on a condamné le gouvernement, et moi je me suis dit mais écoutez, c'est le moment, on doit le faire partir, on doit changer le gouvernement pour qu'on ait des gens qui sont capables de protéger la communauté, de protéger le peuple, au lieu de continuer toujours dans cette misère, dans cette souffrance. Moi il faudrait qu'on l'arrête. C'est vrai qu'on doit mobiliser la communauté, on doit mobiliser le peuple, nous sommes vraiment anesthésiés.
Tunapaswa kulamuka, tunalala sana, tunasinzia sana, tunapaswa kulamuka na tuexige tupate hiyo tribunal yenye itasikiliza kila mtu, itaheshimia droit ya kila mtu. Hiyo ni ka moja. Tuliona hiyo ka ya ba international, ma entreprise international, politique économique yenye na aswa, vile vile tunapaswa lamuka. Hiyo makaa yote tuliona inapaswa kutufungula macho na kutuondoa ndani ya usingizi, na tunapaswa kusema kama trop c'est trop, on nous traite comme des idiots, on en a assez, nous devons nous réveiller. Voilà.
So, Miriam, I have a first question for you. From a European perspective, the history of the Congo begins with the Berlin Conference. The Congo was founded to provide Europeans with raw materials that they lacked for their industrial production. Cities like Congolese were founded because they were located near major mines, and so they needed workers to do the exploitation of the mines. And to this day, the negative effects of the European or the worldwide production of goods are simply being outsourced to countries in the so-called global south. You have been working a lot with activists worldwide, for example, the textile workers, trade unionists in Bangladesh and Pakistan. So you know very well this neo-colonial system of exploitation and of humans and nature in the global south. And you told me once that in all this debate, it is somehow surprising that we don't talk so much about the fact that many structures, such as property rights and the distribution of wealth, have simply been preserved after the independence in countries such as India or Congo, for example. So why is it so difficult to tackle global inequalities and power relations? And what are at the moment the most worrying consequences of the neo-colonial outsourcing, of the negative effects of our production?
Yes, thank you. Also, first of all, for inviting me and for having me to speak here. Thank you so much. Yes, it's also very nice to see Silvestre again. It's very, very nice we can all meet here, even though it's only digitally. No, so I think Well, I think there are two reasons. I think
Merci Myriam. Merci Myriam. Moi aussi, content, plaisir partagé.
Thank you, Myriam. Pleasure shared. Thank you.
So, you know, I think for us living in Europe or North America, the consequences of this business, of this model of how our economy is structured are so far away. And I think there are some Austrian, German sociologists have created this term of imperial lifestyle. And that is, I think that we all as citizens living in the global north are very much and have always been benefiting from the exploitation of others. And our whole economic system is built on the externalization of costs and standards for humane working conditions, environmental standards. All of these standards, it turn eventually into costs if you only look at it from the perspective of profit making, which is the driver of our global economies. And I think our way of life is so much intertwined with this system of exploitation that is really difficult for us to see. And I think it's very difficult for us to grasp the fact that our life would have to look very different if we wanted to really change the system. And then there's a second aspect, which, so what I'm trying to say is I think that the way we live and all the benefits that we have seen in the global north, at least in Europe, but I would also say in North America, sort of with the welfare states that have been emerging and so on, the social welfare states, it's all been built on the fact that we can benefit from exploitation elsewhere, which we don't see anymore because it's not in Europe, but it's outside and it's globalized. And then I think law also plays a particularly important role, and that is that law is creating the opportunity for companies, for business actors, to work globally, to extract resources from countries like the Congo or India, extract resources or use the labor force there. And it is done so, this is our world economic system is crafted through law. So that's free trade agreements, it's bilateral investment treaties, all of that enables economy. And then at the same time, on a different level, that is more when it comes to company structures, when it comes to legal techniques to evade taxes, to evade taxing. You just create different corporate structures and you can distribute, the revenues there to avoid more taxing. So there are many legal ways of how companies can shield themselves from where the real harm and the exploitation of humans and nature happens. And we believe that for us, this all seems like very neutral, legitimate business. And we don't see, and it is designed through law, and the law gives also the legitimacy to that system. And I think, well, at the moment, I think not only do we see, I think through, as we are also all more globally more interconnected, I think, the news about catastrophic events in the Congo, in the mines, but also if you think about factories, textile factories in South Asia, I think we more and more probably cannot avoid this reality. Or at least I'm hoping that we can more and more not avoid this reality anymore. Plus, I think that the climate crisis clearly will put an end to our way of producing and doing economy.
Yes, thank you. Silvestre, you went to Congolese, where the Swiss commodity trader Glencore operates two of the largest cobalt mines. of the world. About 70% of the world's cobalt production takes place in DRC. Cobalt is the most important raw material for the worldwide production of batteries. And you now spoke with more than 30 experts and witnesses in the last weeks. What is the outcome of the Kolwezi hearings? Does the mining of cobalt and copper in the region of Katanga, so in the south of Congo, also have positive effects on the economy and on the welfare of the local population, or mainly negative ones? And has this always been the case historically?
Merci Eva. Merci aussi de me donner l'occasion.
Thank you, Eva, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this event. I also would like to thank Miriam for the fact being here, and it is a real pleasure to see you again after what we have been together in Berlin. Now, I was so passionate that I now participate in the Kolwezi project because we, as Congolese people, wanted to participate because we now really see that this is something that can obtain something. I mean, the Congo Tribunal was really a channel in which we can participate as Congolese people, but this is also something to denounce the non-respect of the human rights. We can also talk about the multinationals and everything that they're doing in Congo. So that's why we've decided that we have to continue this work. And the tribunals of civil society are very important. And now with Kolwezi, we are very proud that we can participate in this project with the Congolese people, with all of you, with some of the multinationals. I mean, what is the result after the Kolwezi auditions? Well, let's say that the result are at different levels. With the Tribunal of Kolwezi, we have researched the political responsibility. We also looked at the responsibilities of the multinationals. And we looked at 4 cases. We had the mining contracts between the different partners. And so we asked ourselves the questions, is this contract, who profited from it? Was it the state? Was it the workers? Was it the multinational? And then we looked at the pollution. I mean, when those companies pollute the fields in the surrounding, when they create a lot of pollution, they also cause damage to the nature, to the human beings. And so this is something that we looked at as well. And then the third case was also the accidents. I mean, we wanted to find out who's responsible if an accident happens. Is it the multinational? Is it the state? Because there are a lot of accidents happening. So who is to blame? Now, we looked at those 4 cases and we actually came to different conclusions. I don't know if I have enough time to go over all the conclusions, but when we talk about mining contracts, for example, well, we had a lot of experts and they told us that outsourcing is a very good problem. Now, before, we needed capital, of course, and unfortunately, the state company got capital, but that capital did not go to the state, didn't even go to the workers there. It was a mechanism that they worked out to only profit for a few, only a few people, some multinationals like Glencore, but also some individuals profited from it. And they just worked out a very complicated strategies to make sure that that mining contract only profited to a few people. And the experts said that this was corruption. And what is corruption all about? Well, corruption is all about the under-evaluation of the price when they bought it. They could buy it very cheaply. And normally when you sell something, you have to take into account the infrastructure which is there, the buildings which are there, the roads which were built, the schools that were there so that the workers got a training. Well, all that infrastructure wasn't taken into account to determine the price. And a lot of damage was done, but no price was paid for the damage to this generation and the future generations. And then a second thing that we noticed is that those individuals and those multinationals, there were a lot of different multinationals, and actually they all took advantage of the weakness of our state. So that these mining contracts did not do anything for the Congolese state, but that the profit went into the pockets of a few people. And no one is doing anything. The international community isn't, the World Bank isn't. And we wanted to know, were they aware of all of this? Were they aware of it, and which role have they been playing? And the experts said, well, they were well informed. They were well informed, but they just made sure that those individuals could do whatever they wanted. They knew about it. They knew that the contract that they were going to sign wouldn't be profitable at all to the Congolese state and only to those few individuals. But they just said that they didn't want to do anything about it, basically. And then also tax evasion, for example. Glencore, that company, and Moby and KCC, well, they all practiced fiscal evasion in different ways. We have seen that the companies get a certain period of time where they don't have to pay any taxes. After that period, all of a sudden, they just close down, those companies. So once they have to start paying taxes, they close down. And that is a very good way to fraud and to evade taxes. And then there were also companies who, at the end of that period, when they didn't have to pay taxes, well, they claim bankruptcy. But they aren't bankrupt at all, but they just claim bankruptcy. Or they say that they just don't make any benefit. They say, no, there's no benefit in this country or in this company. And of course there is, but they just know how to make sure that on paper there is no profit. And then other companies, they just lower the benefit they make. And we've also seen that there are companies who do not pay taxes on the expats. So what do? They ask expats to come to Congo. Now they should pay wages, but they say no, they are consultants. And if they are consultants, they don't have to pay taxes on that salary because they are not real workers, but they are consultants of the company. And so they were able to evade a lot of taxes. Something else that we have seen, and this is something that is an answer to the second part of your question. This whole mining industry in the region of Katanga and Kolwezi, well, who is profiting from it? Is it the local population or is it the company owners? Well, they say that there are a lot of resources in that region, natural resources, many people, many multinationals. Glencore was there, but not only Glencore, many other companies. But the people are still poor. The people are still living in utter poverty. And that is a real contrast. The region is so rich. There are so many natural resources. All those companies are there. And the companies, they always say, well, we come and we're going to improve your living standards. But the majority of the local population is still very, very poor. And let's talk about pollution. The experts and the witnesses told us that Momi and Kasase, both sides from Glencore, well, everywhere they say that they are not responsible for anything. They don't want to recognize their responsibilities. And if they do recognize their responsibility, they try to negotiate. But they negotiate in their own ways. They don't really negotiate. They just say, this is what you have to accept. And when they come to an agreement, very often, the company doesn't do everything they're supposed to do. For example, there was a village. Now, the fields of that village were damaged because there was acid running over the fields, so they couldn't grow anything anymore. And the company said, okay, we'll pay something. So they paid the value of the harvest, but for many years, the farmers couldn't use their fields and they only paid for one harvest. They also said, by the way, that they were going to train the farmers, that they were going to give them production means, but they never did. And so they say, well, let's negotiate, but it's on their conditions. And then even if they reach an agreement, they don't do what they agreed to do. Now, when we asked the experts, so how do you think, or why do they ask like that? And they say, Momi is just acting like a republic in a republic. Momi is just walking over the state, walking over justice. They are not afraid of anyone because they know that even if they would be brought before a tribunal, that they won't be punished at all. And we were very surprised and we wondered about it. I mean, they come, they take all the natural resources, they don't respect anything. The international standards are not respected at all, and they can just do what they want. And when there are accidents, what have the experts told us about that? I mean, they have been able to prove that the companies were responsible for many accidents because people would go there. KCC was aware of the fact that those people came in there to work. They didn't do anything to make sure that those people weren't there. They didn't make sure that they weren't able to go there. But they went there, especially in the copper mines, for example. There were a lot of accidents with people who were going to look for copper in those mines, in the private mines. And now the Congolese state, well, they just gave all these mining areas to these multinationals, and the local population can't mine anymore. And people still go there. They try to make a living. Then an accident happened. But the multinationals don't want to take any responsibility. Can I still continue, or do I have to close down?
Try to close down, to close Sylvestre, but last statement.
Donc, oui.
Okay. One thing that I've noticed is that the people of those regions they've lost hope, I think. They are a little bit in despair. They are fed up with Mumi and Kassise and the way they have acted and the fact that there's no positive impact on their lives. That's the first thing. And then secondly, when those companies pollute the whole area, or they damage the health of the local populations, well, then those companies don't take any responsibility. They don't take into account the needs of the population, the health of the population, and those companies violate, exploit the people without even trying to respect international law or Congolese law.
Thanks, Sylvestre. Miriam, an initiative is currently being discussed in Switzerland that would allow companies like Glencore to be, it would allow the people in Congo companies like Glencore to be charged in Switzerland if they commit human rights violations and pollute the environment abroad. And the initiative and many NGOs that publish reports of human rights violation by companies are often accused of unilaterally demonizing the companies. So actually, who is to blame? Are the multinationals to blame or the governments in the country where they operate? Or where must change take place? In the Western state where the companies are based and the products are consumed, or in the states where the raw materials are mined?
Well, I think this accusation is really is quite a hollow argument, in my opinion, because obviously it is not, and it's not. No one who works on those situations seriously would ever doubt that the government of the Congo has a responsibility to ensure that human rights of their citizens are being protected. I think no one really wants to question that, and and I think obviously human rights treaties are clearly obliging states like the Congo and like Pakistan, India, all of them, to ensure that their citizens especially also can enjoy economic and social and cultural human rights and any other human rights. And of course, those countries a lot of times and the governments don't do enough and they don't do what they should do. And then here we come is because a lot of times they are captured by corporate interests. And it is very clearly that also how our economic system is set up, governments must be interested in attracting foreign investments. And that means because they must be ensuring that, trade barriers are abolished as a precondition to gain World Bank or IMF credit. So, just to say, oh, you're taking away responsibility. No, it's not. That is not, I think, the aim of such initiatives. The aim of such initiatives is to finally also address the responsibility of actors in Europe. And that is, I think, also the European governments, also the governments have a responsibility. This is all debated under the term of extraterritorial human rights obligations of governments. And that is that they regulate their companies better. And that is exactly that they need to regulate and introduce laws like the one that is being demanded and shortly being voted for in Switzerland, so that finally companies start to have somewhat of a responsibility to ensure and to sort of exercise their human rights what is called human rights due diligence obligations towards subsidiaries and potentially, I think, also first-tier suppliers. So this is not about, shifting any blames and pretending and saying that no one is responsible, but it is actually creating responsibility where at the moment there's, great irresponsibility. So.
And what is actually at the moment, because there are a lot of debates and discussion about similar initiatives in all Europe. What is actually, what are the models? How can these things be improved in Europe at the moment?
Yeah, a pioneer is France. In France, there is already a law. I think it's in force already now for 2 years. It's called the Loi de Diligence. So, and it obliges companies to exercise their human rights due diligence as it is described in the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. That means that companies, this is a law in France, it binds French companies that are headquartered in France, and they have an obligation to analyze human rights risks with regards to their whole business enterprise activities. So that means also towards their whole supply chain. And they need to identify potential human rights risks and then come up with appropriate measures to mitigate those risks. And if risks realize and harm occurs, then that law also potentially provides remedy for persons affected, which means that persons can also go to France and ask for damages. But that is sort of a second step. In the first step, it is also possible for civil society organizations and for affected persons to claim that a company has not been exercising their human rights due diligence properly, and to ask the court to order that company to change their business practices. The law is, we've just been filing last week a case under this law with, together with a Mexican indigenous community who's claiming that their rights have been violated in the context of the building of a wind park. And I think there are 3 more such cases currently pending. And in Germany, we're also demanding a similar law that is also, somewhat close to what is being discussed in Switzerland. And they're also in the Netherlands, they are more sector specific. So they're debating a law that is against child labor, for example. So, and I think in general, I mean, you have that on the national level in the EU, then there's a certain dynamic at the EU level where the EU has announced that they will start a procedure to legislate an EU regulation, and you have discussions and negotiations at the UN, at the United Nations, also on a treaty that exactly obliges every country that signs on to this treaty to also legislate companies better. Yeah.
Sylvester, when we began to prepare these Congolese hearings, so the continuation of the Como Tribunal, and that became somehow your project, no? And the project also of our team in Bukavu, Lem Africa, the team that worked with us, with the IIPM on this first tribunal. And nevertheless, you always said that you need us somehow in DRC, you need the presence of Europeans in DRC to make this debate happen, no? Why can't you make this, have this debate without us or without our presence there? And why is it so difficult for the Congolese government to introduce laws that benefits the Congo and the people living in Congo, and as they did, for example, with the new mining law in 2018, 18, and why is it so difficult to enforce these laws against the companies?
Voilà. Pour la continuité du débat.
Thank you. Well, regarding the continuation of the debate, indeed, I always said that I need you, I need your presence, and this for different reasons. First, it is necessary to have a cooperation between a Congolese team and an international team. And this for a very simple reason. Even if we are dealing with Congolese cases with violations of the law in Congo, we need the international cooperation because we are dealing with international companies. So it's necessary to have this support to know more about the case and to enrich one another. We need the international community so that we could also report back at an international level such cases. Because as I said, the international community is involved, so we have to report back. And we also want to continue with the lobbying action, because the aim of the first Milo tribunal and of our own tribunal, so the aim would be to change things and to contribute to the development of Congo. So it is necessary to have this advocacy work in Congo, but also elsewhere. We also have to conduct that advocacy work at an international level, as Miriam just said. And of course, we have this theater or film, and therefore we also need a technical support. We need some advices. And this is why this cooperation between my team and your team is so important. We have to do something in common and something that would be consistent. And finally, we need you because it would be impossible to do what we are doing without money, without resources. And it's very difficult to collect money in Congo. And that's why you are also very necessary. And I would like to grasp this opportunity to express my thanks to all of you, to all the institutions, all the partners that helped us, that provided money for us to organize that tribunal, and also all the organizations that helped for the dissemination of that film, which is very successful. And the Kolwezi hearings are also very well welcomed in the different Katanga provinces and everywhere. So this cooperation is very, very important and very helpful. Now, coming back to your second question, the law and why is it so difficult for the Congolese government to enact laws that would be to the benefit of its people and of its companies. I would like to say that it's not really difficult, but there is a lack of willingness. Congolese authorities are not willing to introduce good laws. Second thing, there is an absence of political leaders with a vision, a good vision for the country. We don't have good leaders who love Congo and who would like to work for Congolese people who really want Congo to develop. So we are lacking such good leaders. And we also have a problem regarding patriotism. If some people took advantage of mining contracts, it's just because they don't like the country. So it's a problem of patriotism and also ethics and the integrity of political leaders. If at the head of the country you don't have people with a role of a model role in terms of ethics, you're not going to have laws that would benefit the population. And then, of course, impunity. They are not going to enact laws that are going to sanction their bad behavior. So each time there is a law that could be a break to what they are doing, of course, they're not going to approve such legislation. And finally, you were asking whether it is complicated to apply, to enforce laws against companies. No, it's not difficult, but there is a lack of willingness, as I said. We also have a judiciary system which is really under the influence of the president, and they are all intertwined. The executive, the judiciary, the president, well, everything is intertwined. And laws are there, but we don't enforce them just because the institutions which are supposed to apply the law are either weak or are afraid, are under the pressure of the heads of state, of the authorities which are at the head of the state. And the enforcement agencies are also involved in corruption cases or fraud cases. For instance, experts told us, or they told about a fraud or corruption case multinationals cannot give subcontracts to foreign companies. So this is forbidden. But we realize that Congolese are involved in subcontracting. They even create companies. So they're not going to, again, to approve or to enforce laws regarding subcontracting or outsourcing. So just in a nutshell, we have lots of problems, and that's what I wanted to say. To enforce the law, it's difficult.
Miriam, we with this Congo Tribunal, we are now trying to have a kind of a transnational dialogue, no, between the Congo, Switzerland, and Europe. And you have a lot of experience of working together with activists all over the world. And what, in your opinion, is how kind of transnational dialogue of this kind has to be shaped and organized to make it work, that it doesn't, that it could become something like a horizontal dialogue, that it's not only, that we are not only reproducing also power hierarchies that are existing in other sectors?
Yeah, probably. I first, before I come to that, I first have a comment on what Silvestre just said, and I think also just to stress what he just said is that, and this is why we need. Also, this is the content part of why transnational dialogue is needed, because there are the different perspectives must be seen and brought together. And I think also, just as we just heard Silvestre speaking, I think none of those business lobbyists could now say that we are ignoring the responsibility of any state in certain, bad situations. But I think the thing is, there's also always a question, well, whose responsibility is it to speak about which issue? And I think for Europeans, we are in a very good position to speak about the responsibility of the European actors. And I think I also just want to stress again how powerful companies are. And I think those corporations are usually, and those CSR people, they're so good in talking us into on how complex this is and how little power they have, because the the government of the DRC, and I know this from the textile industry, it's always the Bangladeshi factory owners that know everything and that the poor brands can't do anything. And then just as one stark example in the COVID crisis, when the crisis hit and all of Europe was in shutdown, lockdown, and all clothes shops, all textile shops closed down, within all major brands canceled their contracts completely illegally. I've analyzed with colleagues, and we published this also, the contracts. It's absolutely no legal basis. They were able to, or just as Glencore is able just to shut down a mine for whatever reason, they can just decide to do that. And irrespective of if that's legally possible or if that's, whatever. So they can just cancel all their contracts, say we're not paying even for the products that are already on the way to Europe. And within 2 or 3 weeks, all of Bangladesh was basically on the verge of collapse, of economic collapse. So I think that, and that's just one country, one example that is in textile industry, and the same goes for others. So I think we simply cannot underestimate the power companies have, irrespective of what they always say. And then on this question, how do we, so that's why I also feel like we just need to talk about the same issue from those different perspectives, and those different perspectives must have their room. And especially, I think, and that's sort of, if you think it through for Europe, it's especially important that in Europe, the voices of Sylvestre and Nasir and Sarah and others are being heard, because those voices must be represented here in the public debates. And it can't be just us talking about the others. And the same in my experience is also that, of course, now if they're Europeans and if they can speak in the Congo, that also makes a difference, because it does create a different attention than if just Sylvestre by himself is saying this. So I think this is what the benefit is, that we need to understand that we can lend each other legitimacy and also strengthen. We need to find ways so that we can strengthen each other's struggles and positions. Now, I think in order to do so, we also must be very much, we all must be very much aware of where we are at, what our privileges are. So, and that obviously means, especially for those coming from the global north, it does take a lot of reflection on privileges, on assumptions that we have of coming from a certain background, and assumptions that we have on how work, for example, like it's very practical, and I think, and also it's actually a very personal thing of, who am I and why am I speaking about what in this context, and what does that mean that I'm here in this context? I think it means also that we must be very honest with one another. It must be also willing to go through some conflict in a constructive way, because there are misunderstandings easily, and there will be misunderstandings. And I think that is something that we must be willing to engage in. And that may sometimes take much longer than we wish for. But I think, especially from sort of this northern perspective, I think where we're all a lot about efficiency and getting things done quickly, those collaborations take time, and it takes time to build up trust and mutual understanding.
Sorry, I have a question from the public. Well, it's actually a long comment, but I would only try to read the question. So my question is, could it not be a point to underline very explicitly and loudly that the Congo Tribunal actually is fiction, and that this is a scandal? The fictive character of the tribunal makes obvious the problem that there is no real and official tribunal. The fictive dimension of the tribunal can be seen as a claim to enact a real and official tribunal. Well, it's actually more a comment than a question, but perhaps I would like to ask to add another question, to say, but if the Congo Tribunal is a kind of a model, or like some kind of a utopia of this World Economic Tribunal, or of a global jurisdiction for a global economy. How should this actually look like, this global jurisdiction, or in your opinion, what would be like the best model for this? And I would like to ask it, of course, to both of you.
Oui, pour moi, c'est possible. Hein?
I think it's possible to have such a global tribunal for global economy. The Congo Tribunal is not a utopia. It is a very good initiative, and we already have very positive consequences. We already see the impact. When we went through Europe with the film, we got a lot of reactions. People who saw that film changed their habits. People were surprised. People said, "Is this really happening?" People got a lot of courage as well when they saw that this was happening, when they saw that this was possible, when they saw that we could actually do something about it. A lot of Congolese people got hope out of it, got proud out of it. So yes, we can change things. We can change the rules. And what kind of model do we need as a tribunal? I think we should try to work out a different kind of economy, an economy where the human beings are at the center of the economy. Companies who take care of their individuals. Instead of what they do today, we have companies who exploit their workers. They don't even care about their workers. They don't even care about values, about universal rights. They don't really care about the individuals that work for them. And just as Miriam said, those are companies who only look at profit. They only want profit. We need other companies. We need companies who say, yes, we want profit, but we want to do it in an honest way. We want to do it without any violation of human rights. And to be able to get there, I'm sure that there are many obstacles. I know that it will be difficult to obtain, of course, because I'm sure that multinationals will do everything to go against it. A lot of states will go against it, and a lot of individuals will be against it. Just imagine companies who are corrupt already for years, states who have a lot of bad habits, who profit from corruption. They will be against such an initiative, of course. That's one big obstacle. How are we going to deal with that? But also the egocentric society we live in, actually. I mean, companies are egocentric, the politicians are egocentric. I think that's also a problem. And as Miriam has said, I think that if we really work together, if we have allies, if the international community works together, then I am sure that we can do this, that we can go for a better global economy and an economy where the human beings are at the center of the economy. That's my vision of the future.
But just Sylvestre, in a very concrete way, how would this tribunal be? Where would it be located? And who will be the lawyers and the prosecutors? And how do you imagine this kind of World Economic Tribunal?
Ben, ce tribunal, je crois qu'il faut...
I think that tribunal, we should make sure that it's situated in a country which has a symbolic value, a country where they respect human rights, so that it is a symbolic tribunal as well. If it's a tribunal in a corrupt state, for example, then no one will think that it's credible. We should have that tribunal in a state where they respect human rights. Who would be the lawyers? Who would be the judges? Well, I think there should be some kind of complementarity between lawyers of the third world, lawyers coming from the countries where the human rights are being violated, but we also need international lawyers. We need a symbiosis of both worlds. And I think that we should really do that if you want to have a universal tribunal. So all the judges, all the magistrates who work there, well, they should be 50-50 from the south, from the north. But the most important thing is their morals. I think the morals of the people who work there are the most important. They have to be people who have a high integrity, people who are competent, people who are intelligent, people who know the international law, but they also have to know the national laws. So those lawyers, judges have to inspire confidence and trust. And I think, of course, that the rules they have to use have to be independent. It has to be an independent tribunal, a neutral tribunal, a tribunal which will respect all the principles of the human rights, of the international conventions. And I believe it is possible to have such a tribunal. And I think it's necessary, most of all, because the impunity is still ongoing in many countries in the world. Impunity is happening every minute, and everyone is silenced about it. We are silent about it. I mean, look at my country. Look at what happens in my country. But Beni is a city. It was a city which was attacked already for 5 years. We have rebels coming into that city. We know that. Everyone knows that, and no one is stopping it. Why isn't the government doing anything about it? Why isn't the international community not doing anything about it? Everyone knows that these attacks are happening, and no one is doing anything. So we need a tribunal who looks at these kind of cases, who wants to find out the truth, who wants to listen to the victims, who wants to give a voice to the victims. And once they rule on something, that has to be applied. Now, I know that I have a lot of big dreams, but that's the way I look at it.
Miriam, what is your vision of this tribunal?
Yeah, so I would say I agree on a lot of points with Silvestro on how he portrayed on how the tribunal should be working and put together. But I want to also be a little bit provocative in the question if it really is a world tribunal that we want, no? Because I think there are different levels. Because of course, there is a level where we need justice, and we need justice for the atrocities and the cases that we see and that are being dealt with, no? And I think probably also on this comment, do we need the tribunal so that it becomes obvious that the justice is lacking? On the one hand, yes, but on the other, obviously also in some of the cases being discussed, you do see that the national justice systems are somewhat dealing with this and then fail to deal with it. And so yes, I think the tribunal is a bit about something else. I think the problem you always have in law is that law narrows down aspects. And I think the chance of a tribunal like this is that it can be wider and it can tell a story in a more complex way, and it can show responsibilities and how things link together better than I think you could in any lawsuit that you can imagine before any tribunal, no? So, and I think if you think about this, obviously we need better laws and we need clearer rules. And then we need courts also to enforce those rules. I personally think that the enforcement must be usually more on the national level. It must be in the Congo, it must be in Switzerland, it must be anywhere. I don't think that we only need to hope for one big tribunal that will solve things. But I think it's also not only about bringing case after case after case before a tribunal I have doubts that this will change everything, but what can, I think the contribution of individual cases and tribunals and real court proceedings can have is that they can contribute to wider debates and to wider dynamics that actually create change, no? So I think, our economic systems will not be more just because we have a court, and be it an international court or functioning national court systems. But what we need is, our economic system must be democratized much more. There must be the questions, who's making a decision about where to open a mine or not, is a decision that must be done by the community affected, by the country in which it's located, by the population, and not just by either governments that are more or less corrupt or by companies that are just powerful and have the interest. No? So I think, while I obviously as a lawyer, I do see the value in law and cases and lawsuits and tribunals, but I also think we can't overestimate the effect that this has, no? Because it's always somehow, they always come late when already things have gone wrong. And we need to get into a different position where we change things before they go wrong.
So Sylvestre, I let you the last comment of the conversation. We will finish this soon. So do you want to add something to this?
What I would like to say is that I'm very happy that this project that started with Milo and the Congo Tribunal is continuing now. And it's incredible to see how much interest the Congolese people have in this project. We went to Lumumbashi, we went to Kolwezi, everywhere people participated in this project. They were very interested. They did a lot of things. They volunteered because, yes, we have suffered. We have suffered a lot, and people have things to say. And they've had now the possibility to talk. There were hearings. They were able to say what they have lived. They were able to say how they suffered. That's a first. And of course, they hope that this tribunal will actually make a change. And they are convinced that it is possible. If our national authorities will listen to the victims, if they would just hear what they have to say, we believe that they might change. We believe that they might change. We believe that the international community might change their opinion if they actually hear what we have to say. So that's why those hearings, that's why this tribunal is so important. And that is what gives us courage. We have now a lot of new courage thanks to this initiative. And now we're going to talk to the national authorities, to the international authorities, and we have hope again. We have hope again. We believe that we can change things. And step by step, who knows, we will have a great change, a better change for a better world.
Thank you very much, Sylvestre. That was a very good last comment. So for everyone who would like to see what happened during the Kolwezi hearings, you can follow this, as I said, on Sunday at 4, between 4 and 7. you can follow it on the live stream on the Facebook page of IIPM, International Institute of Political Murder. Thank you very much for your attention. And yes, I will close this discussion now. Thank you very much.